on Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. I'd like to acknowledge that we have a quorum, and I will start by calling roll. All right, so once I call your name, if you would please just either raise your hand or say here, we can go ahead and count you as present. All right, I'll start with Christina Abante. Thank you. Welcome, Christina. Megan Reichley.
Here.
Good to see you. Thank you. Alyssa Stewart. And I understand that Alyssa is actually out excused tonight, so we know that she won't be here, but thank you. Lorna Gilmore, welcome and thank you. Helen Keyberg, and I'm sorry if I butchered your last name.
Present. That's Kibenge, actually.
Thank you, Kibenge. Thank you for that.
Yes. Thanks.
All righty. Lucretia Shoto. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, yes, I don't see Lucrecia here. I think it's so she might be absent tonight.
All right, then we'll move forward. Ray Manahan.
Here.
Hi, good to see you. Tony Curry.
Right here.
Good to see you as well. And I understand Tony will be dropping off at 6:30. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. All right. And then, of course, there's me, Shalonda Curry, and I'm here. And I'm sorry, Shalonda Fleming. The name hasn't been changed in the system yet. So thank you. And then we have Jacob Rubenstein.
Here.
Thank you. Preeti Madipan.
Here.
Thank you. And then Kelly Munn.
Here.
Good to see you. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you all acknowledging that you're here. We will go ahead and start to move into the agenda, but first I want to list a few ground rules just so that we remember some important things to make this meeting flow well. So first and foremost, we want to remind everyone to just please be as concise as possible when speaking and try not to speak more than twice during a specific motion that's on the floor for no longer than 10 minutes. We'd also like to ask that everyone keep their information relevant to the current minutes. And I apologize. Yoshi, stop. Thank you. Sorry about that. And then please just remain courteous to everyone who is speaking. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself. And then, of course, if you all have any questions or comments, we want to ask that everyone either post question or comment in the chat so that we know that you have something to say, just due to the fact that anybody that's on the phone may not be able to see or see your chat or see your question. Also, we want to just remind everyone to please speak slowly and pause frequently for our interpreters. We do have some interpreters on the line. So Hillary and Harry, thank you for joining us tonight. And then I want to just give you all a quick reminder as to why we're doing this online, essentially due to the governor's proclamation 2028 related to COVID-19. We will hold public meetings, specifically this meeting remotely. Thank you. And Monica, if you would please, I'm sorry. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'll ask that you all approve the minutes. Does anyone have any corrections that we need to make to the agenda for tonight? And I'll give you a few minutes to look over it if you haven't seen it.
Corrections to the minutes, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, correction to the minutes. All righty, if there are no corrections, then I'd like to approve the minutes unanimously, or I'd like to give a unanimous consent to the minutes. All right, it sounds like we have no corrections. All right, then the minutes is unanimously approved. Monica, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Shay. Board members, the next agenda item is public comments. And we did not have someone officially sign up to make public comments. However, we do have a few attendees tonight, and I would like to acknowledge them and give them an opportunity to speak to the board. So give me just a moment. So one of the first attendees is Robert Leider. Mr. Robert, I'm gonna unmute you so you can introduce yourself to the board and make your comments.
Okay,
And
hello.
I think you were asking, you can speak for 5 minutes, but
Okay.
take us, yes.
Okay, I don't.
Welcome.
All right, I've never. Hello, board. I'm Robert Leiter. I'm from Flint, Michigan originally. Just moved here to do ministry in the community. Just see a lot of, and have always seen a lot of things that are wrong sometimes with how we do some ministry and things, and I'm just trying to help change some of that stuff that I just think is poo poo and caca. Sorry if those are inappropriate words. And I just want to help move the needle, and I just figured that this group of folks and other folks in this community probably are trying to do the same thing, and so I just really want to see what's going on and learn from those here, and just learn and try to be as humble and open and listening and able as I can. So that's it, I think. Thank you for letting me have a little moment to speak and introduce myself.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Leider. Welcome to Issaquah. And yes, we would love to stay in touch, and please join any other meetings that you would like. And also we would love the opportunity to stay connected about other events. So feel free, if you have the ability, to put your contact information in the chat, and we would love to stay in touch. So thank you again for joining us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And board members, we have a second public member in the attendee section. So I'm just gonna, Mr. Richard, nice to see you. I'm gonna unmute you in case you would like to make any comments to the board. I unmuted you. Good evening.
Good evening. I just want to say I wish that I could share my video. I don't know what's going on. So sorry about that.
Actually, Mr. Richard, I apologize. I can certainly make you a panelist and you can turn on your video. Give me just a moment.
Oh, sure. No problem. Thank you.
You should have the ability now to turn on your video.
Okay, great. I just didn't want to look like I was hiding. I'm just a member of the community and had an opportunity to talk to a couple of people today about some issues I've had around being gay and disabled in the last 5 or 6 years that I've lived here. So they invited me to kind of come and listen to this. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, and please feel free to stay for the entire meeting if you have the time. And thank you for your comments. Okay, board members, I don't see other attendees, and we don't have anyone else signed up for public comments. So this concludes the public comment section. Shay, back to you.
Thank you, Monica. I appreciate it. Alrighty, then if we have nothing else, we'll go ahead and start to move into our agenda items. The first one being the equity framework overview. And that will actually be presented by Stephanie. Stephanie, are you ready? All right, I see a thumbs up. Let's go for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for having me. I had the opportunity to come out and meet you at the December meeting. We did some introductions with our internal equity team and you all as the newly formed equity board. So happy to be here again. Before I get into my presentation tonight, Candy Lorenzo is here with us tonight. She's also from the HR department. We thought we'd take the opportunity to introduce her. Today is her second day of employment with the city of Issaquah and in the Human Resources Department. And one of the things that, you know, she's onboarding, and we're talking about all the things that she's going to get to help and be a part of. Our continuous equity conversations internally is certainly at the forefront of that. And so I want to take a moment before I get into my presentation to at least just, I won't speak for Candy. I'll let her have the opportunity to introduce herself to you all.
Hi, my name is Candy Lorenzo, and I feel very comfortable in front of all of you here to tell you my name is Candy Mariana Navarro Lorenzo. I'm a non-native English speaker, so English is not my first language, and I would just like to thank you for everything you're doing. I mean, I've been in Issaquah all of 2 days, and I feel very welcomed. I feel this is a very inclusive community, and what you're doing here is amazing. Stephanie's got great plans, and I'm very excited to be a member of the team.
Thank you very much, Candy. And Stephanie, would you like me to share the PowerPoint at this time?
And that would be great. Thank you.
Okay,
So,
one quick reminder, Stephanie, before you start, to please pause after each sentence, not quite each sentence, but after a couple of sentences, to allow time for our interpreters, our Spanish interpreters.
okay, and Monica, you have to keep me honest because I'm a talker, so I will do my best.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. So tonight, my goal is, you know, and Monica, you could advance to the next slide, is where we talk about our purpose here tonight, is to really provide this team an overview and background on the work that we've conducted to date citywide, a little bit about training, but really the heart of the conversation that we're here to talk to you tonight about is bringing you up to speed with the work that we've done in forming equity framework. An equity framework is simply a tool utilized to analyze proposed policies, programs, budgetary decisions to ensure those decisions do not have unintended consequences or adverse consequences on marginalized groups. So we're going to talk through kind of our timeline and where we're at. My goal tonight is really to get direction from you, bring you up to speed on what we've been doing now that you all are a part of our team. I would love to get some, you know, initial feedback from you on the work conducted so far, and any direction that you can provide us on next steps as we really look at doing this work together. Monica, I have a logistics question. Is the interpretation happening secondary to me pausing? Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yes, so it's happening, that's why it's happening at the same time as you speak in the background. So that's why it's just, yes, you're great.
Okay, great.
And
Thank
I
you.
invite Hillary and Harry to jump in if they feel like you need to slow down.
Awesome, thank you. So, you know, I'll tell you that I've been with the city since 2015, and I've been able to see a bit of a timeline. In that timeline, we're going to really kind of focus on background from the last couple of years and where we are today. I'm going to close my chat really quick here because my PowerPoint is really small. So, you know, back in March of 2018, the city introduced the idea of equity training to all our staff. We realize, you know, there is a key opportunity here within the work that we do, the workforce that we have, who we are as a city, and where we want to go to really bring equity to a forefront of conversation in the organization. So those original conversations started to happen at the executive level back in March of 2018 in a meaningful way. Part of that conversation was, let's get really used to talking about equity and training staff and having this as a part of our everyday conversations. And so one of the first orders of business that the administration wanted to do was to hold equity training for all our staff. In May 2018 was the first opportunity for staff to attend a series of equity workshops. We executed a consultant contract with an individual, and we had our first couple sessions. Feedback from staff at that time was that we took quite a strong approach. And one of the things that I've recognized in my career of human resources is really identifying the best trainers and the best content for conversations. And I think we saw we missed the mark a little bit there, in all honesty. And so we held 2 first trainings, and then we took a pause. We took a pause because we wanted to hear the feedback. We wanted to have these trainings meaningful for staff, and we wanted to make them in such a way that the conversations were very welcoming to the organization. I should probably pause there a minute again.
You're doing a great job, Stephanie, with pausing.
Thank you.
At least compared to how we've been doing it. And I want to speak for myself on how fast I tend to speak. Great work.
So following that first introduction to training in May of 2018, and then putting a pause on it, with other work plan items, it was never meant to be put on any kind of shelf, but with other workload, this work really wasn't picked back up in a great meaningful way. We had some change in the administration, other issues, until the following year, March of 2019. We put out a call of interest to the organization to begin a cohort. A team of 6 staff signed up to begin a 9-month cohort training on advancing racial equity through the GARE program. Monica Negrilla here this evening was one of those 6 staff members that was a part of that GARE training. Lauren Knox, who's on a current medical leave from the HR department, was representing the HR department. But really that work is exactly what it says here, was to have a cohort to really be subject matter experts for us in the organization on how we advance racial equity.
Sorry, may the interpreter ask Ms. Johnson to speak a little bit slower for us? Thank you so much.
Do I need to repeat any of that?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. So along with the 9-month GARE training, fast forward to September 2019, we came up with a fancy name for this cohort called Team Equity. We introduced Team Equity to the city internal staff. As a part of that introduction, we held our first couple events that we had historically not advertised internally in the organization. One of those items was Welcoming Week celebration, and another was 3 opportunities for a cultural panel series for staff. That was really the first time after we had done some introduction in 2018, a whole year, almost 18 months had gone by before we reintroduced in a great way, some real opportunities for people to join events in the city as a part of, advancing racial equity work in the city. I'm going a whole year later, almost, to my next place in our background. I think we all know the significance of the death of George Floyd that happened in May of 2020, and what that meant in the importance of advancing this work, not just internally, but certainly to our community at large as well. And Monica, could you advance the next slide, please?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. And I apologize. I'm trying to work with a board member who's trying to log in. So I'm a little bit, that's what I'm working here. But yes, thank you for that.
No worries. So following the death of George Floyd and some foundational work that the city had already underway with this work, this really became a prominent, necessary conversation that we bring back to the forefront. We had done some baseline work, but we identified a lot more work that we needed to focus on and bring to limelight within our city. Really, I'm very proud of so many things that the city has accomplished since August of 2020, which really kind of brings us to the conversation at large. I see my chat going off, and I want to make sure I answer questions. I don't have it open, so let me make sure I do that so I'm not missing any questions. So I apologize for that. I'm going to pause here a minute.
And Stephanie, would you like me to call on the members that have posed those questions?
Sure, I'm happy to have you help me with that in any way. My PowerPoint gets small if I have my questions open, so helping me juggle that is great.
All right, and Tony, if you'd like, I can go ahead and just repeat the questions for you because I know you might be jumping off soon.
Sure. Go ahead.
So let's see. Here's the first question. What was the response of the staff in these trainings? Was it favorable or otherwise?
Yeah, great question. Because quite honestly, we put a pause on it because it was not favorable, and not favorable. And I want to explain why. I just remember some of the feedback that I got at that time. The staff was very supportive and welcoming of such training. I think the content and the trainer that we chose at the time came in with, and as we become more comfortable with these conversations, I think we've all learned as an organization. But I know that, being in HR and hearing some of the staff at that time, one of the first, things that the trainer had said is, let's give a moment of silence for the land we've all stolen here in Issaquah. That affected staff because they didn't know how to receive that. They hadn't had, that sensitivity to that. And some comments about white privilege and that kind of rubbing, staff wrong. And so I really believe, we learned in a first couple of sessions that we needed to start with some just basic education and understanding. We were gung-ho about offering things, and we didn't really educate with the history behind it. I can tell you, I'm actually glad that happened, because when we get to the point of talking about the trainings that we've done in the last year, we really started with just some facilitated conversations about deconstructing our biases. And that went a really long way. And so I think we were able to learn from that opportunity and really move that forward as a result of that feedback from staff, because individuals need to be comfortable having these conversations, even when they're uncomfortable, right? So it wasn't overly favorable to some, not all. Some were very receiving. We decided to take a pause and rethink about how we were going to do it. Shay, are you
Tony,
helping me?
thank you.
I
Yes, I was gonna jump in. I just wanted to make sure that we allow the interpreters to do their thing. But definitely, Tony said thank you for their clarity and insight. The second question he asked was, did an increase in desire of staff for this type of work increase in 2020, or did we see a decline? And I just added that piece. He did not ask if we saw a decline.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the answer is absolutely. I think, you know, our world was shaken by what happened. Our city population, our internal staff was shaken by that. Where we had done that original call for interest in cohort and GARE training in 2018, part of the next part of the timeline that I'm going to talk about here in a minute is in June 2020, after that happened, we went back out to the organization and asked for a call of interest for those joining the team. And we have over 20 members want to join our internal equity team. So, you know, where we had to kind of do some nudging of 6 people to join a cohort and get this initiative running. We had an overwhelming response in 2020 and a real desire to continue those conversations and do more.
Thank you. And for that, I think that was some great clarity on what we're doing. I don't see any other questions, but if we could pause for just a moment and I'll ask if any of the other board members have questions at this point. All right, it looks like we're all set.
Okay, so following the death of George Floyd, some internal conversations, a call for more interest internally for the equity internal team. In August 2020, the City Council adopted what you may all have seen or not. You would have to educate me on your knowledge of the Police Accountability, Equity, and Human Services Action Plan. That was the beginning conversation of a different kind of framework to really start to form this equity board. One, I'm pausing, but two, I would also be remiss if I didn't mention, and I don't have it on a bullet here, the City Council in 2020 participated in their first equity baseline training as well. And so that was an opportunity where we had historically reached out to staff internally. The council really showed an interest in this as well. And so that occurred in August 2020 as well. Fast forward to December of 2020, we realized that, you know, and I'll speak for myself in HR and for HR staff, so much of what we do in HR in employment it has a foundation of equity, but it doesn't necessarily have the external, you know, focus on equity to our community other than how our staff are performing in business that supports that community. We did not have the internal staff to really be a chief equity officer. Uh-oh, Monica, I think we, can you go back a minute? Thanks. We decided to execute a contract in December of 2020 with someone who is very knowledgeable in this work, Dr. Pat Effiam of Equity Consulting Services. we partnered with her because we needed a partner in this and help us facilitate this so that we approach this work in a way that's going to be meaningful for our employees, our residents. We have a resource because quite honestly, we've all been learning together and growing together. And so one of the things that the council was really committed to was executing help and resource and dollars to this work. Gonna fast forward just the very next month. And I want to mention that during this time frame, there's a lot of things that have been happening during this time frame as we go along. We put out a RFP, a request for proposals for equity trainers. So while we had contracted with Pet FEM, we also were looking at our next opportunity for internal staff equity training. That part that we started back in May 2018, and we learned some things. How do we bring that back? How do we bring it back better? While we were working to execute a contract and make a selection for the RFP, we decided to purchase an internal software. It's called Treliant, and we introduced 3 Treliant training courses that we assigned to staff. I have offered the equity board to participate in those trainings. And if you did not get your email, I recognized a snafu today. So do know I am on that. You will absolutely have the opportunity to participate in the same trainings that the staff participated in. We decided to have the staff participate in 3 trainings over the course of January, February, and March, so that starting in March and April, we would have our consultants selected and really begin more training with our internal staff based on the RFP selection. In February, while we were doing a couple things in parallel here, we introduced the training courses to staff online. We also executed a contract with a second equity consultant, Channon Kelly Ray. We began to work with Channon to design and structure our next staff training that we would offer to begin starting in March of 2021. In March, when we introduced facilitated conversations, I mentioned that came back very well received and a different approach to training our organization. The City Council also participated in racial equity tools training conversation regarding an equity framework with a third consultant that we have partnered with. You all may or may not know Benita Horn, who has been doing this work for a long time. So I just want to let you know, the background that brings us here today, introduces some citywide training, some council training, and some consultant contracts as well. Monica, will you go back 1 second? Sorry, I just want to pause for.
And I was going to say, Stephanie, I did have a question. Do we have a moment to ask?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to know if we've continued to utilize these trainers and consultants, and do we see any, I don't want to say necessarily mandates, but any agreements for city workers to continue this training?
Yes and yes. Let me clarify there. So I just executed a contract with Channon Kelly Ray to conduct additional deconstructing our biases conversations with the new hires that didn't get the opportunity for training since the last training occurred in September. We also wanted to bring that same training and conversation to all our boards and commissions. So one work plan item for 2022 is to bring the exact same trainings that the internal staff have received to our boards and commissions so that we are all training and speaking the same language and moving this work forward together. The second part of your question about, mandates or policy for citywide training, our equity team has been talking about, okay, what's next in terms of training for our staff? We had a 2022 work plan discussion in January. Our meeting in February is very focused on equity, what's next with equity training in general. Or I shouldn't say in general, what's next with equity training to bring to the organization now that we've done 3 Triliant trainings and we've facilitated some deconstructing our biases training. How do we continue to move this work? The equity framework that we're going to get, we're going to talk about, we need to train our staff on what an equity framework is. So I think one of the next opportunities for training is getting our internal staff also, familiar with an equity framework and training around that. The administration is very supportive of that. We have brainstormed about a potential requirement that every year each staff member dedicate so many hours towards an equity training or initiative. We very much brainstorm, do you have a menu of things available to you that the equity team makes available and you get to check off a handful of things that you've conducted? We're still exploratory in all those things. But we have talked about embedding this work and sustaining it, that it's not just we have done training and we are done. That is the last thing we want to be doing, but that this is continuous training that we have every year. And we've talked about, it being things, as simple as attending one of the events that we advertise. It could be, a book club and sharing of knowledge about something you don't know about. So yes, there's an absolute commitment and talk about that going forward with what we've done, but figuring out what's next.
Thank you so much for answering that question for me, Stephanie. Does anyone else have a question at this point?
Shay, I believe Lorna had a question earlier.
Shannon, I was just
sorry, I missed you, Lorna. Please share your question.
No worries. Shannon, I wanted to know if there was any conversation and discussion as part of the 3-part workshop by Triliant training, or was it purely course that staff engaged on the computer on their own?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it was on the computer and it gave some just foundational things so that when the facilitated conversations began, employees were familiar with concepts and terms that were then brought about in those facilitated conversations with Shannon. So yes and no, it was computer training that then became real conversation in the facilitated conversations, although different vendor and consultant, but that key terms, concepts, thoughts, conversation were familiar.
And did all of the same staff or all of the staff participate in the discussions with Shannon Kelly-Ray?
I'm sorry, Lorna, will you repeat that one more time? I was distracted by reading chat.
Oh, sorry. So I saw that on the previous slide for the timeline, it said staff assigned 3 courses. So were all staff also assigned to do the deconstructing a bias with Shannon Kelly Ray? So was it
That's correct.
all of the staff
So
also?
all our staff minus 1 or 2 because of sick, or it was a very low number that did not participate. So out of roughly 250 employees, all 250 or 240 something, we've got a list of who hasn't been with it or conducted those things, so that we can, you know, pick that up and they complete in 22. So all staff, we were really proud of that internally, I will tell you, because for all 240 some of our staff to participate in 3 online trainings, 1 you know, facilitated conversation, that's work the city had never done before. And so we, you know, we found that as a real success and something that we're trying to embed into the onboarding process for new hires, and that we continue this work. Okay, I want to be cognizant of time, because I know there's other business, and I know we still have quite a bit to get to our content. So I'm going to phone my friend Monica and Shay, and I just want to make sure I can keep going, or, you know, do we, you know, I imagine some of the things that we're going to talk about is going to be probably over the course of a few of these meetings, a couple at least.
Yes, and I would say so. And unless the committee needs a break or anything like that, I think we're good to continue.
Okay, great.
So I'm sorry to
Stephanie.
interrupt. I've been raising my hand for quite a while, but I don't know if we have changed the rules since the last time, if it's electronic or if I raise my hand in the video.
And I'm sorry, Lucretia, I'm looking for comments and questions. So I didn't have the participants list pulled up to see the raised hand. So my apologies for that.
So how are we supposed to do it? Can somebody clarify that for me?
Sure. Generally speaking, we should either post in the chat that you have a question or a comment, not necessarily writing out the question or the comment, but just saying, hey,
Got it.
question,
Got it.
comment. And then that usually lets me know that you are wanting to ask a question or leave a comment. However, I'll do a better job of monitoring the participants list so I can see who has their hand raised.
Oh, no problem. I mean, I can totally do what you just described. I just thought that we had agreed on the little hand, but it's okay. So can I ask my question?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So my question to the panelists is, have you considered, or will the city consider, the possibility of including the participation in these sorts of trainings as part of the yearly review for employees, so that there is an incentive for them to actually, you know, take it possibly more seriously?
Yeah, that's a really great thought and question. The city went away from the traditional performance review model a couple of years ago. I won't get into the weeds of that, but the traditional performance review we found was somewhat of a universally hated process by both supervisors and managers because it didn't feel timely. We've really moved our organization in a way to do frequent check-ins that does evaluate performance. So I don't want to I don't want to misspeak that we aren't evaluating performance, because it's being evaluated, but continuous, through continuous check-in and conversation. One of the things that we're working on, you know, we had to move away from that traditional model and really help coach people to have conversations. That was kind of a first step in that process. We have an employee experience team internally, and one of the main initiatives of that employee experience team. They're very interested in equity work. And one of the really one of the work plan items that is of significance that we actually are talking about just this Friday is growth and development. So I think that's going to be the beginning conversations of blending the two. How do we talk in check-ins about growth and development, and how does that growth and development also include equity and other training? So have we gotten there yet? No. Is there a vision to get there? Yes, we've got a little bit of work to do, but great point. And I will certainly bring that forward in conversation. I'm facilitating that discussion on Friday.
Thank you. I appreciate your response.
Yeah. Okay, so yep, go ahead.
Stephanie, one last note. I think you have about 5 more minutes, if that's okay. If you perhaps, I know that you are time limited, and as you mentioned, definitely move forward. But perhaps if you want to try to go to the presentation, and we'll continue next time, if that's okay.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, because I think I've given a good summary of staff training, consultants selected, council, trainings that brings us to at least July. If you go back 1 minute, Monica, the July 13th council study session, I want to really bring to the forefront of your attention, because this is when we introduced to the City Council, after some baseline training and some beginning conversations about what an equity framework is and building a tool, we introduced 2 concepts of frameworks to council. So you can advance. We introduced a step model, and we introduced a postcard model. There is not one better way than another. These are just different tools that different organizations have created or adopted to help them, frame equity in those policy decisions every day. We're going to start with the STEP model. This is an example of the City of Seattle's. As we began to conversate around building an equity framework in Issaquah, we went and did homework to see what other people had. Let's see what's out there. While we need to make something for Issaquah, if we don't have to reinvent the wheel in areas, let's see what's out there, especially in some bigger cities that maybe have been doing, some of this work longer or have had more staff working on it. The STEP model is a focus on the process and not the specific questions. So this is very high level STEP model. Setting outcomes, involving stakeholders and analyzing data, determining benefits and or burden, advancing opportunity or minimizing harm, evaluation step, and certainly reporting back. I'm going to show you a few different ones here that we got a hold of. So that was Seattle, and they have a STEP model. This is Renton. It's less about the graphic and more about the process, but everybody has really adopted what works well for their city, and we're looking to do the same. And that's part of the feedback that we're going to want from you as we design. And I say we very purposefully, we the internal equity team, we the equity board, and we our city council members as we develop for Issaquah a framework. This looks very similar to Seattle in terms of steps about process. Portland is the next example here. There's is even more simpler in terms of 3 core things: see it, get ready, and do it. Although there's 7 steps in their model. So those are 3 kinds of examples where we could, offer a step model. The postcard model is the second option, and this really gets at the heart of the questions to ask. You will see here in Portland, although Portland had in that previous example both a step model and the postcard model, because they have a process and then they have I'm going to call this, the postcard model is what Stephanie's opinion is, a cheat sheet. Let's have this in front of us to really be asking these questions when we're reviewing, policies, programs, budgetary items. This gets at, many questions, but, I summarize it to the why, what, who, where, when, how, in greater detail. Briefly describe the proposed action, whatever it is. What are the desired results? Let's think about those at the forefront. Who are the racial ethnic groups affected by this action, and how will each group be affected? I'm not gonna, in the interest of time, read all of these because you do have them in your materials. Because I think one of the things as we're getting close on time here is to just introduce you to a couple of different models. And then we can talk about, how we get into focusing on what this, equity board, recommends to the city council, other thoughts and things that we need to consider. So I'm going to go on again to our consultant, Shannon Kelly Ray. She has used a postcard model. She has a standard set of questions for self-reflection questions for community decision making. These are very much like Portland's in the previous slide. Whenever you're looking at anything before you in policy, program, or other, oh, sorry, Monica, will you go up? I mean, I can choose kind of any of these. Have I made any assumptions? So I'm thinking I'm using this tool as an equity board member. I'm using this tool as a city staff member. I'm using this tool, as a council member. Have I made any assumptions about the culture, identity, genders, abilities, identities, or background of those affected by my decision? These are key tools that help us kind of train our brain or think through how we use this framework to help us in our decision making to advance access to programs, racial equity, and all the great work that we're all doing to advance this work. So again, this is another example of the postcard model from Shannon. And then I think we also have, if you'd advance, Monica, we also have a simple 3-question model from one of the other consultants that I've mentioned this evening, Benita Horn. 3 questions. What are the racial equity impacts of a particular decision? Who will benefit or be burdened by the particular decision? And are there strategies to mitigate unintended consequences? So tonight we're introducing to you, these are part of the materials that the council and the staff have participated in the training. We have not talked equity framework with our staff. I mentioned that's an opportunity for training organizationally. That July council meeting is significant because in terms of bringing you all up to speed, because, oh, Monica, will you go? I just want to make sure I get those last questions up on that last slide. So I mentioned that July 13th meeting because that's the last time the executive administration went to the city council and had an equity framework discussion. These two models were brought before the council. Shannon Kelly Ray facilitated a conversation with the council at that meeting to introduce both models, the step model and the postcard model, and to get council feedback on what that looked like. I can tell you in summary, the council really liked the idea of the postcard questions that they could sit before them as decision makers to say, if we have a policy or something before us, these are the questions we should be asking as policymakers, how this affects our community. We left that meeting with some input from the council. Part of that, after that date in July, we began forming this board, the equity board. We told the council that we would take their comments from July, we would bring it back to our internal equity team, and we would come back in Q4. Other things, pandemic and all, happened in Q4 that needed us to push that conversation to Q1. But in the process of all of that, this board was formed. So one of the things that some of those council members have asked is that the equity board, you all have input into a model that we use as we evaluate our programs, our policies, the tools that we use. Are you favorable of a step model? Are you favorable of a postcard model? Do you like both? Do we start out with something small and put something on, you know, a next work plan for something greater? The thing I want to leave you with tonight, and I know I've taken up so much time, I'm so sorry, I want to make sure we were pausing and that you get what you need to tonight. I would really like this board to consider, you know, would you like to see more models or samples? Would you be interested in framework training that the council has received so far? Maybe you are familiar with a framework that you've experienced before. What do you need from us internally, you know, myself or Monica or our team? How would you like to be involved in this process? The city council really values your input on creation of a tool and wants you to be a part of making that, and that this is, you know, a collaborative effort between the internal team, the council, and you all. So with that said, I've used up a lot of time. I think we've talked about needing to come back. If you have questions or thoughts about how we can meaningfully come back at a next meeting and how we advance this work, you can filter those through Monica. You can reach me. You know, I'm, you know, obviously internal staff as well. However, we can work together to really advance this work and start to create a tool. Our next goals are to pilot a program using a tool. You know, we don't have to create a tool that's a one and done. I think all of this work is continuous. So I think that, you know, it's important to remember, like, let's create something, let's test it out, and then we can tweak and see if it's working to the, you know, the way that we wish for it to be. The last thing I want to do is for us to all build a fancy tool and it not meeting the intent of what it's supposed to get to in advancing this work. So I encourage you all to think about, you know, I mean, just a framework, a model, what would be really helpful for you all, council, staff, and we think about, you know, how next to start to build that. All right. I think that's all I have, unless there's any other questions. I know you have other work to get to tonight.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate you going over that presentation. I absolutely loved it, and I'm sure the rest of the members did too. I'd like to ask really quickly, does anyone else have any questions at this point? All right, looks like Ray has a question, and then we'll follow that with Kelly. I'm sorry, Kelly, I just happened to see Ray first.
Hi, Stephanie. Can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Hi, hello. Thank you for being here. One of the things that stood out to me is the whole concept of data and how that drives decision making. So I think we were given some demographics regarding what exists here in the city, but to maybe dissect that a little bit more, and this probably goes back to myself and my colleagues here on the equity board, what is it that we are trying to address? Is it homelessness? Is it equity through pay? Is it sexual discrimination? A lot of that drives on us establishing what it is that we're trying to achieve based on the needs of our city. So if there was any data that was created to maybe spur that thinking or lead us down the correct path, I was curious about that. Or is that something that's expected of us, that we worked with the appropriate entities to put that to compile that data? That's my biggest question, is around data.
And Ray, I heard you in that comment say, this is a question for our team. I think that's a dialogue that you all need to, decide. Input to council on what you believe, is what you should advance is, I'm sure, part of what they're going to want to hear about. I know in the work that I'm doing internally is advancing that our population in terms of city staff and the community that we reach is representative of the community we serve. We need to be communicating with everybody for all things, and that's a really big lift on a lot of levels, right? I do know that we're in the baby steps organizationally of putting some metric to things. I heard you in terms of metrics. We're just in 2020. I can tell you from the HR perspective, we started looking at the demographics of board and commissions that we'd never seen before. We started looking at the demographics of city staff. We have equal opportunity employment data that we have to submit biannually, as a part of employment. So I keep a number of metrics, but it's more internal staff focused, and I'm going to phone a friend in Monica that she may be able to help advance this team in that conversation. But I think we're at the beginning stages of all that thought dumping, right? And along with, what council's expectations and this team forming that up. So I don't know that I have a super great answer because you had a lot there, but I also heard that this was really kind of a posed question to this team to think about data and what our end goal and line is and what we should be working on next.
Yes, you hit it right on the nose.
Thank you for that great question, Ray. Kelly, are you ready to pose your question?
Yes, thank you. You probably said this and I just missed it, but the framework that is being built, it is going to be used by who?
I think it's going to be used by a bunch of different audiences. And here's the other, I don't know if this is the greatest answer, but we get to create who uses it. We know that the city council wants to use a tool in their decision making when items are before them. We want you all to think about this as a tool as you're advancing work in any particular area. And every department, I'm envisioning every department is responsible for looking at the programs and the policies that we have and thinking about these things. And here's where I think that these are the building blocks that where rubber kind of meets the road. If the internal staff are asking the same questions around building a policy, that then goes to the city council, and we've thought about it at this level, and then we're thinking about it at the decision level, but then you all bringing in the community, you know, aspect, you're asking the same questions. Eventually, we're all using it, asking the same questions with different opinion, insight, thought, and advancing that. So I think it's, without having one before, I'm envisioning it's at least three audiences. It's our staff, it's our board, it's even, you know, a community in the questions, that these become familiar to us. This is our tool. And certainly council as the decision maker.
Thank you.
All right, and I didn't see any other hands or comments in the chat, but once again, does anyone else have a question they may want to ask while we still have Stephanie here with us? All right, then I will say that if there's nothing else, Stephanie, we want to thank you for joining us tonight. You've given us a lot to chew on. I'm also going to offer a break to the group if you all would like to have one. And I don't know if we need to vote in order to do that. Is that correct, Monica?
You can just do show of hands, perhaps, you know, if folks would
Yes,
like
can
to.
we get thumbs up for a quick 5-minute break? All right, it looks like we have the majority of the group that's agreeing to a 5-minute break. So we will adjourn for a brief moment here. It is now 7:10. So I would like to see us all back here at 7:15. Everyone's ready? All right, welcome back, everyone. We are back from our break, and now we're going to proceed with the next 3 items on our agenda. We'll have Monica talk with us about cultural and religious holidays, and then we'll also have her talk briefly about a member proposed conversation. And then lastly, we'll have Monica go over the staffing report, and then we should be ready to close unless there's any other business. Monica, are you ready?
I certainly am. Thank you so much, Shay, and good evening again, board members. Good to be here with you and being part of these great conversations. Allow me just a moment to start the PowerPoint adequately, hopefully. Oh no, not again. Okay, we are all set. So, as you may remember, last month we started a great conversation around cultural and religious holidays to be acknowledged by our city. So tonight we are returning to you to seek feedback on the updated proposed list of religious and cultural holidays. And hopefully, if you feel comfortable at the end, we can make a formal recommendation to the mayor, basically sending to the mayor our list of holidays. Just a brief background for those of you who might have missed the meeting last time. The administration tasked the Equity Board with creating a list of cultural and religious holidays the city should take into consideration when scheduling public meetings. And so the question that some of you might ask, or other community members, is why should the city acknowledge holidays? So on one end, oftentimes public meetings conducted at the city, whether they are city council meetings or boards and commission meetings, whether they are various community engagement meetings, these at times coincide with religious holidays observed by other religious groups or communities, and therefore limit participation from those groups. On the other end, the city currently acknowledges certain religious holidays, especially those observed by the federal government, right? Christmas Day, for example, right? And so therefore, we have an opportunity to really promote community respect, to promote inclusion, have a welcoming feeling to community groups that belong to other religions and not just those celebrated by mainstream society. And we also have an opportunity to formalize our commitment as a city to diversity and inclusion. Interpreters, please let me know if you need me to slow down even more. I am really, really trying. So the approach that we used in creating this list, we did a few different things. On one end, as we often do, we started researching what other local and regional jurisdictions might have in place. We also provided some data, and we did some research on the Issaquah specific demographics to see what does Issaquah look like in terms of demographics and religious communities. We contacted directly either community members or religious groups or religious leaders in Issaquah to ask for input. And we also asked your input as a board. And so last time during our meeting, we received feedback from you, and I'm summarizing it. We heard from you that there was interest in learning information about specific ethnicities included in the Asian demographic shared. If you remember, 23% of the Issaquah's population is of Asian descent. And one of the great questions that you had was, okay, within that Asian population, can we break it down even more? Can we have additional information to learn more about that? We also heard from you interest in getting additional community input on these dates. We also heard from you that we should consider adding the holidays associated with the Christian religions also. So then we have really a broad list that's inclusive of all religions, or perhaps not even all, as many as possible, especially that are represented in Issaquah. We also heard feedback about adding more cultural holidays and Native American holidays. So you wanted us to consider expanding that list. And then making a difference between the cultural and religious holidays. Further, we heard from you that we should consider having a calendar that's more comprehensive than the one they presented last time, and perhaps indicate certain cultural and religious holidays that the city should avoid scheduling public meetings, but as well perhaps include other holidays that should be recognized and celebrated, not just be avoided by when scheduling public meetings. You also told us that we should work directly with community partners and organizations, and again, to clearly define the criteria that we are using to determine what is on the list of those holidays that we should not schedule public meetings on. So with that, we included your feedback. We did research on the Asian communities represented in Issaquah, and I have some information on that. We expanded the list, we defined the criteria, and we did contact community groups. So on to defining the criteria. You have, in addition to the PowerPoint presentation that's on the screen, in your agenda packet, you have the entire list that is preceded by this definition of what this list is, and the criteria that's on the screen. So we have an extensive list of holidays that are divided in 3 groups. There are holidays that are highlighted in red, and they are marked with an asterisk. And these are the ones that we note that the city should make every effort to avoid public meetings on these days. These holidays are religious holidays that typically include work restrictions. They might also require fasting, or they really have special significance in one's religion or cultural. So all of those holidays that are marked in red, we vetted those with community members pertaining to a specific culture or religion. A second list of holidays, those that are, I believe the color is gray, just the regular color, most of the holidays included on the list. These are additional holidays, and they can be both religious or cultural, but they are provided to really, as you rightfully so provided feedback, to offer opportunities to city staff and to the community to increase awareness and promote understanding and diversity in our community. So city staff should take into consideration these holidays when scheduling meetings, but they don't hold, let's say, the same religious significance as those marked in red. For example, there might be a holiday that it's a Hindu holiday and it's not marked in red. City staff can highlight that holiday, learn more about it, and they can, depending on the type of community engagement that they have or plan to do, they can take that into consideration. Let's say if they want to engage with communities of Asian descent, knowing that that's a Hindu holiday, they might think and reconsider their decision to schedule a meeting on that day. But perhaps if they can use that information, if they know that perhaps there's a Hindu celebration somewhere else, they might take that information into consideration and perhaps join that celebration. So it doesn't have the same rigor with trying to really absolutely avoid scheduling a public meeting. It is more to increase staff knowledge, to increase public knowledge and awareness, and to learn about that holiday. And third, then we included the federal holidays, and these are highlighted in green, and they are really just to note that these are holidays that automatically are recognized by the federal government. City offices are typically closed, and so they're just there to be included with the other holidays as well. Board members, really, I think the way we envision and we hope that this list will be utilized to begin with, as mentioned also last time, I believe that this is just the first step into increasing diversity and inclusion in our city. I personally envision this as an internal tool. I would love to work with our IT team and have all the holidays included in our Microsoft Outlook. In the morning when we turn on the computer, the holiday will pop up on our screen in Outlook. And we would also have a link that we can just access and learn more about that holiday. Perhaps we can go further and provide some appropriate greetings or salutation for that holiday, where then people can learn more about that. So that's one way that I envision this tool being used internally by city staff. But I also see this as a tool that, as some of you recommended last time, we promote it in the community, and the community can also access it to learn and also be aware and increase awareness of what's out there in the community and what other communities are doing. So with that, since last meeting, we reached out to a variety of communities, and we engaged either with individual members, families, or religious groups. And as I mentioned, this is the beginning. Some of the work is still in progress. For example, we had built since a year and a half ago, actually, when we first started the work on creating the equity board, we engaged with the Baha'i community in Issaquah, and they've been faithful supporters of our work since the very beginning. And while they really are very supportive and approved the holidays that we included in the list, they are also preparing a more detailed list for us, where we continue to have an opportunity to learn about their community. And so I'm hoping that we can continue to do that with all of the cultural and religious groups that we engage with, or those that we still need to continue to engage with. So questions and discussions for us tonight. Is the list reflective of the feedback that you provided to us last month? And do you feel comfortable that it can be used as a pilot to start us off somewhere and then continue to vet it with the community and with other religious groups? And with that, the options that we would have tonight would be to recommend that the proposed list be sent to the mayor to use by the city as a tool when scheduling public meetings. And with that, as we post the list and we invite the community to continue to add to the list and continue to provide input, or you can propose something else. If you don't feel comfortable and you feel that we should continue the work and we should do additional work, that's certainly an option as well. So our recommendation is to review and finalize the list if we can, and start somewhere and make a recommendation to the mayor to start piloting it. However, as I said, certainly we would want your input, and we would not want to start if you don't believe that it is in a place where this can be used. And I did not, again, you have it in your packet. The list is there. I'm happy to pull it off and share it on the screen as well. It's a pretty extensive list though. And I'm very, very thankful. Many of you actually participated individually in providing resources, or also in consulting with me. I really appreciate this. Lorna, for example, shared last time, and she brings the school district perspective. I consulted with her, but also with Priti and with Jacob and with other members as well. So thank you so much for all the individual extra work that you also put in this, in addition to the other committee members. So I'm gonna shut up and look forward to your comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Monica, for that explanation on the cultural and religious holidays. I saw that Lucretia and Preeti both had comments. So Lucretia, I happen to see your comment first. So if you would go first, and then followed by Preeti, and then of course we'll jump to anyone else if they have comments or questions.
If my question was covered in the last meeting, just tell me to give me a resource, Monica, so where I can read about it. But if it hasn't been covered, my question is, so when I looked at the documents for today's meeting, I was curious, like how did we come up with, the dates that we're recognizing for each culture? And so I went into the Japanese culture simply because I think it was one of the first ones or something like that. It talked about Shinto religion. And so I went onto the national calendar for Japan to see what's recognized. And I want to say maybe a tenth of those that we're listing were listed there. So then I was, wondering, like if in the culture that we're trying to be mindful of and inclusive of, if they themselves aren't celebrating those things in their country, like how are we coming up with them to celebrate them here, right? Because I guess I'm trying to gauge like what criteria are we using to bring those to that community calendar, so that it doesn't become kind of like an overwhelming sort of like every day is a holiday, or every day, like where do we begin to discern the why, I guess. And it could be that we want to be more involved, or we want to include more religious holidays that other countries don't. I mean, I honestly don't know what the answer to that is. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lucrecia, and welcome to the challenge. I think this is the biggest challenge, and I think we did start a little bit the conversation last year, like last month, where is that limit between, definitely wanting to be very welcoming and inclusive, but at the same time still being able to conduct public meetings, because if we do acknowledge all of them, there's something every week that we are not going to be able to actually conduct business at the city, right? So that's kind of like the tough decision and the conversation that led to great input from the board in saying, okay, let's have a reduced list of those that we really strongly encourage whenever possible not to schedule meetings on, but then let's be more comprehensive and expand the list to really show our inclusion. And we don't need to have a celebration every week, but I think having encouraging staff and community members to read about a religion or a holiday that they are not familiar with just increases everyone's awareness. And there's an opportunity for, let's say, I have a meeting this afternoon with a regional meeting with other jurisdictions, and I happen to know that, okay, this is a religion, this is a holiday celebrated by the Japanese culture, and I happen to know that my colleague from Kirkland is of Japanese descent. I might just start a conversation and say, hey, I read about this culture, and maybe I also read about this greeting, and I want to start a conversation that way. Does that make sense? So I think that's kind of like the intent for use. But then going back to how we started, as noted earlier, so we started first with what did others do and what is some information out there that's being curated and used by others who are a little bit further along than we are. So we started that as a basis, and then we tried to apply it to Issaquah and try to reach out to community members. To the example in particular that you said, the Shinto religion is the one that we did not reach out to because we did not find someone in Issaquah from that religion to really vet, to even ask, are these the right holidays? Should we do it? This is just information that we found. We used at the foundation of the work was some work that was used by Berkeley in California, by the city of Berkeley. So that was our starting point. And then from there, we made it Issaquah, if that makes sense. We made it more specific to Issaquah. So does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think my question was more around like how do we, I think you tried to address it in terms of like if we're trying to hold these meetings, like where do we begin and end to like actually be able to hold meetings. And it's ironic that of course I had to pick Shinto as my, kind of like my test basis, and then that's the one that you didn't get feedback on. So anyway, I guess I'm just trying to say, I guess maybe what I'm trying to say is if in the country that we're trying to be inclusive of, those holidays are not being celebrated and or people aren't taking time off, like I think maybe we could also use that as a gauge for like when we don't have meetings. But that's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and we did that. And I think one of my lessons that I would like to share with you all is that I learned that the more I learned, the less I realized that I know, because there are many, many, many more holidays than the ones that we highlighted in red that actually have work restrictions and offices are closed and public meetings are closed, and it's becoming overwhelming. And so I think I would love to be there where you mentioned, Lucrecia. I'm a little bit fearful that actually we'd not cover all the major ones to be respectful of the entire community. And that's why I would like for us to pilot it and hear from those that perhaps we didn't even know that we should hear from. Because yeah, that's, yeah. And we actually, to just one more example, we did hear from community members of our from Islamic background. We actually took off 2 holidays based on their recommendation, and they told us it's going in too much detail, it's not helpful, just use these, and that's very respectful. And that was feedback well received, because like I think that's where you were trying to go, Lucrecia. We don't want to go overboard and then try to be overly
Right.
right,
Yeah,
zealous,
I'll
and
just
then
say
not.
this last comment. I guess I would like to say that if we're trying to be equitable and correct, anyone please jump in if I'm not correct in saying this. If, you know, our national holidays are 5, I don't know how many there are, but there are 5, then maybe other majority minority groups also get 5. Do you know what I'm saying? And have people pick and choose those, right? Because I mean, like if I think of like a Catholic country, I mean, we're gonna have a holiday every day, right? So I guess I'm just trying to say, like, we need to figure out how many we're doing per culture and give that community the voice to pick those holidays.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just another idea.
Thank you. And that's, I think we gave the communities the voice to tell us. We did not want to limit it to number. We just basically, when we reached out to them, we told them, hey, this is an initial list that we were thinking about. Can you give us your feedback? Are these the right holidays? If we were to make the difference between the ones that we strongly encourage to the city not to have holidays, which ones should be those? And so I think we heard from them from that perspective. So that's where we got to where we are now. But again, I think that's why we should also test it with the larger community, right? So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Lucretia. You always have really insightful information, so I loved your questions. We have Preeti, who's next, and then I have a question about the calendar as well, if we don't have anyone else that wants to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. So I'll just, say like I I was really impressed with the calendar, so I just want to give you all kudos for that. I I to me it feels like it's in a good enough shape to kind of pilot out or test out either internally or, I think it might be a decision whether to make it public yet. I think if you make it public, you may want to have a space, like a little like a forum where people can chat in feedback or, nominate other cultures for the same type of inclusion. But so that way it's kind of, it make it clear that this is something that's still alive and changing and evolving based on feedback. Um, I, I'm just, reflecting on like if I were in a community meeting and it were, some sort of Indian holiday and it was just acknowledged, that would go a long way towards, fostering that sense of belonging and welcoming in a community. So I really think it's a great start to doing that or continuing in that process. So I do want to just share that. And yeah, we don't want perfection to be the enemy of progress. So I say, let's, take the next step. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Preeti.
Thank you, Preeti. Great comment. I loved it. And I have a question, partial comment kind of thing. And Monica, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that we are still considering this calendar a really fluid thing that could possibly change throughout as we grow as an organization and a group. So I think it's worth mentioning that the effort and the work has been put in and it's been done very well. And maybe we just need to let the public know that if there's something that we've missed, let us know. Give us that feedback so that we can make those adjustments when needed. Because to everyone's point, it's going to be long and outdrawn if we find ourselves putting every single holiday that everyone feels might be important. And that's not to say that it's not important. However, it's unrealistic to believe that we're going to be able to celebrate all these things or have meetings postponed for all these events. And unfortunately, it's just not realistic. So I think it's worth saying, hey, we've done a great job. We really are trying. If there's something we can put in there for you, let us know and we'll work through it to make sure that we can present ourselves in the best light.
Thank you, Shay. I appreciate it. And I believe Lorna also has a comment or question for both.
Oh, my apologies, Lorna. I did not see see you
No
there.
worries. It was my fault. I put it in under host. I just wanted to address, Lucretia, I don't know if we can do equality for the religious calendar, because I don't know if we can say Hindus get 5 holidays, Muslims get 5 holidays, Buddhists get 5 holidays, because I'm just wondering if the celebrations and the needs are different. So, for me, it's really about what the religion or the culture needs. For example, in talking, I work with a family advisory group in the district, and in talking to a lot of our families that were Indian, they said, we don't want the school to go out of their way to cancel events or do something different because of our holiday. As a family, as a community, we have multiple days. We can do this, we can do that, because they said they really wanted the kids, and many of the parents were really focused on the education, and they wanted the school to have more flexibility in some of these events, but acknowledging it was helpful. But on the other hand, in talking to some of the Jewish rabbi that I worked with and some of the Jewish students, a lot of those celebrations were in the temple, that it was really impactful, and it was really important that we acknowledge many of those days, because it was a day that the students was really going to be impacted. And historically in our district, our students and our staff have had many discussions about certain days. And so we try to go on to what days were really impacting our students. And so in some religions, we realized that there were more need, and other religions, the community told us there was less of a need to really say, no, don't have any event on that day. Just give us they gave me fewer days to really look at. For example, even in the Buddhist calendar, in talking to 3 communities, 3 staff members that were Buddhist, they talked about how they celebrated, and so it wasn't really, acknowledged. You have it in the calendar. If someone is Buddhist, then be aware. And so that's the Monica's second part, where be aware rather than this is a critical day off. So I really appreciate Monica's part of the calendar where this is critical versus this is, be aware of people around you, that it's not as critical, because we definitely heard that from many of our families, that there are certain days that were just, this is so important. We realize that it's many days, but it's just really part of who we are. So we were really trying to lean towards equity rather than equalities for this.
Thank you, Lorna. Board members, any other questions or comments? I really, really appreciate everyone's support on this. And I know it's just the beginning. It's really not the end. As you said, it is something fluid, and we want to continue to engage with the community. So if I don't see other questions or comments, may I ask for perhaps a hand up if you all feel comfortable that we could start piloting this and perhaps sending it to our mayor for review, or perhaps if you're not so sure, or if down, definitely meaning no, let's not send it yet. I see a lot of hands up. I don't see one from Kelly, Lucrecia, or Christina. Don't see. Oh, there you go. Okay. And I see Christina and Lucrecia are the only ones who are not so sure. Would you like to tell us a little bit? Would love to hear your thoughts on that before we move forward. Christina or Lucrecia, who would like to start?
I've already spoken. I think I'll let Cristina go.
Pues básicamente no estoy segura porque no conozco todas las culturas, entonces no sé. Me quedo neutral.
Basically, I'm just not sure because I don't know all of the cultures, so I'm kind of like just stuck here like this. Neutral. Neutral.
Así que creo que cuando vienen las personas a un nuevo país, parte de sentirte identificado, pues es tratar de adaptarte al ambiente, ¿no? También.
I think when people come to a new country, part of mainstreaming is making the changes and adjusting to the local culture.
Entonces respeto a todos. Me siento neutral.
So regarding that, I feel like I'm in neutral on it. I just respect all of them.
Thank you, Christina. From my experience as an immigrant, I would love to say that I can relate. We were always taught to, if you go to a different country, you need to go and learn and absorb the other and learn the other culture and not expect others to do yours. So I can relate to that. However, I do think that it's so important for us to recognize all the cultures and yeah, to acknowledge them. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify real quick, Monica. I want to make sure that people hear what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that I don't want to recognize cultures or that we shouldn't have the calendar. I think what I'm saying is, I think there are two separate calendars, correct? There's the one that's going to be, here are some dates that we should really not hold meetings, and then here are the ones that are more inclusive, that are more broadly representing each culture. I think what I'm trying to say, I think my comment is more towards the one where we're actually cognizantly trying to not have meetings. That's where my comment is geared toward. I would like to, in addition to what I said earlier, is basically have a clear understanding as to like how are we making those decisions, because I think like with what I think it was Lorna who said that some cultures require more and others require less because of when they're celebrated or how they're celebrated. And I think I want to dissect that a little bit more, right? Because it can't just be like, oh, we're just going to have all of, because at some point for me, then it starts to not even have value, right? If we just have a whole bunch of things out there, then people just kind of become desensitized as well with too much information. But again, yeah, I mean, it's just one voice is questioning this, and I support what the majority is doing, but I'm not 100% on board.
Thank you so much, Matt. Your comments are so valued, and we really appreciate that. Your perspective is really important. So I definitely like what you have to say, and I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying. And to kind of move us along here, I saw that Kelly had a question. And Kelly, if you still have that question, I want to make sure that I give you the floor. And of course, I'm encouraging everyone else to please, if you do have a question, please go ahead and post in the chat that you have a question to make sure that we call you and that I see you so that we don't miss your question. Oh, Kelly, I'm sorry, sweetie. You're on. I'm sorry, Kelly. You are on mute.
Yeah, I turned it on mute. Anyway, I'll get used to it. Mine's procedural. My question, it's really easy. We're asking for thumbs up. I'm an alternate. Should I be doing it?
Thank you
Yes,
for
you are
that,
a very
Kelly.
important part of this group.
So it's only on votes towards a motion, unless I'm invited in, I do not vote, correct?
Yes, and we did not want to pose a vote, an official vote on this. I think we
Yeah.
were just looking for, input from the board. I don't believe that an official vote needs to happen. Right, and so that's why I was just asking for the thumbs up.
Okay.
And so definitely your input is very important, just like any other member. So thank you for that, though.
Thank you. Yes.
If you may remember at the beginning of the meeting, Helen was able to only join by phone, but I'm so glad that you're able to join by computer now. Thank you. And I got also your thumbs up that you're not able to join. So thank you. Let us know if you have other comments or questions.
And Monica, I don't see anyone else, so I think we may be okay on this topic at this point. Of course, I'm sure we'll end up coming back to it because we all have questions as things change. So we will, if it's okay with you, I'd like for us to move forward just in the interest of time, because I know we're getting short on time.
Yes, and I just want to mention to you just a brief, in 20 seconds, brief next steps. Definitely we will bring this back to the board as we are piloting it. I would like to just send it to the mayor. The mayor may choose to take it as it is and turn it into an administrative policy internal for the city and start piloting it. The mayor may also choose to say, you know what, I'm going to send it back to you. You guys need to do more work, or I want to hear additional input. The mayor may also send it to city council for a larger policy discussion. So I will circle back to the board to see what we hear from the mayor's office. And then regardless, we will definitely circle back as we continue this work. This is just the beginning, right? So thank you so much again for your input and valuable feedback today and last week, last month was such a great conversation. And with that, I do recognize that we have a few more minutes and 2 agenda topics. With your permission, the next agenda topic, I would like to start and have a brief conversation, but because Tony had to leave early, we would love to continue this conversation next month as well. So my 2-minute update, I'm not gonna even share the PowerPoint anymore, again, in the interest of time. As you may remember, the last few months, Tony was the first one to bring an equity conversation and propose a topic for the board to have community conversations around equity. If you remember, the topic that he first brought up was equity versus equality. And there seems to be an interest, but limited time into continuing community conversations around equity. Along the same line, there's also an interest, and there are all sorts of cultural events happening throughout the year. So as you might have seen an email from me earlier, we ask for volunteers to help host and work on an event for Black History Month. While we need to continue the conversation on what the board would like to do long term with engaging the community and how you would like to go about having either conversations that advance equity in the community in the board, or if you would like to create a subcommittee that's going to work on engaging with the community, or also a subcommittee that's going to work on organizing different events. These are conversations that we would love to have with you next month and continue for the next couple of months and see how you would like to go about this as a board. As an equity board, as you know, it's so important to stay engaged with the community. And I think that it warrants a longer conversation and really brainstorm about different options. For tonight, though, in particular, I would love to get your support or thoughts on whether or not you feel comfortable supporting and hosting a Black History Month event that some of you, a subgroup of you, have been working on for the last week. And I would like to name, so Shay, Tony, Priti, and who am I missing? And Sophia, and am I missing someone? Yes, Alyssa are part of a subcommittee, subgroup that have been working on putting together Black History Month. Ray also offered his time, and we so thank you, but because we did not want to break the Open Public Meeting Act and have a quorum, we are just keeping in touch with him at this point. So the subgroup that's been working decided to host 2 events on February 17. One is a lunch and learn event from noon to 1, where we would invite community members and so have a facilitated panel conversation on the role and meaning of Black History Month. And the second event is in the evening, and it's a Kahoot trivia game from 6:30 to 7:30. We can send you certainly information that we are ready to promote. I think the question for you tonight is...
Could we interrupt? What was the date of the evening one?
At the same, February 17th at 6:30. Thank you. So do you feel comfortable as an equity board to endorse these events and for us to say that is the equity board hosting them? Or would you like this to just be an event hosted by the city at large, in which case the board members who've been participating in this, they will just be volunteers who are participating? So you have 2 options. We just did not want to move forward and just say the equity board is hosting this event without asking you as a larger board. So again, I can take some questions, or if you feel comfortable already saying, yes, I feel comfortable, no, I don't, or I don't know, we can do that. See Megan's hand up, Lucrecia. See. Dorna is, I think Jacob is the only one that I don't see your hand up here. Okay. Well, I think that was easy then. Thank you so much. We will send you an email. We will start promoting the event on Friday, but we will send out an email to all of you so you have a chance to see the description. And then we will continue then next month with like a larger long-term conversation. How would you like to go about different events and community engagement? Does that sound good? Thank you. And then I realized that it's 8:02. I can take one more minute. I don't, just for staff report. And then we are done. Yeah. Okay. So with the staff report, I just wanted to circle back with you because last month I mentioned to you that the draft Human Services Strategic Plan was going to be presented to City Council. We actually had one of the equity board members, Tony, was at the meeting, and I just wanted to circle back and follow up that a second draft will go after the Human Services Commission next week. We'll go back to City Council on February 15th. So again, if there's any interest in that, feel free, but don't feel obligated. And I think that's just my small report and follow up to you all. And that concludes, I think, the agenda items for tonight.
Thank you so much, Monica, for all that great information. We always have lots of work, but we are ending the night at 8:03. So you guys will get 2 minutes back. So thank you for your time. At this point in time, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting unless anyone else has a question or comment, and I'll give us a quick pause here. All right. If nothing else, then we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.